Right, thank you. So a little bit of introduction. My name is Ying, and I'm a full-time postgrad student from the multi-region country Malaysia. And today I'm going to share my work, which is Rewind, a story-based serious game to reinforce the learning of CBT strategies for anxiety disorders. Unfortunately, today I'm the only one from my team who attend this conference, so bear with me if you have a little bit trouble with understanding my English. So if you need further elaborations, feel free to tell me so. So without further ado, let me just get started. So now, when it comes to anxiety disorders is actually a common mental disorder with the highest prevalence among all other mental diseases. But it appears that people generally are still reluctant to seek professional help, forming barriers between themselves and health facilitators. Because basically, when you want them to seek for professional help, it means that they have to expose themselves to other people that I am having trouble, I'm having mental problems. And then as far as I'm concerned, especially for me who is coming from an Asian country, people like us are really reluctant to expose ourselves or share our problems with other people, which is actually a big problem when it comes to these kind of situations. And also, while games can provide a therapeutic solution as a self-help material with entertaining elements, game-based approaches require considerable efforts to obtain a balance between gameplay ability, fun, and sound learning design that aligns learning outcomes with assessments. So, my objectives of developing this game includes to design anxiety-relatable scenarios based on real-life incidents following the CBT model for a story-based serious game to complement the treatment for anxiety disorders. So meaning that I am not coming up with this idea as a means to replace any existing therapeutic solutions, but as a complementary tool to assist the current existing solutions. Now, the second one would be to explore the incorporation of CBT-inspired game mechanics into a serious game for anxiety psychoeducation. So for your information, CBT refers to cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a commonly used therapy by those psychotherapists to help patients to improve their conditions and prevent any further development of stressful situations. Right, and lastly is to measure the efficacy of a CBT-based serious game targeted to reinforce the learning of CBT strategies for anxiety disorders. Now, definitely game has the potential for expansion in mental health domain, and then there are lots of research attention needed for anxiety disorders. Given the high prevalence of computerized therapies such as online learning, such as remote communication, it is definitely plausible to explore or to investigate game interventions in helping the learning processes of the therapeutic contents. Now, this comes to my solution, which is a serious game definitely to fit today's topic, right? A game solution to reinforce the learning of CBT strategies. And here we go, that is Rewind. And I am going to show you a demonstration later on, so bear with me. Now, when it comes to past research, we have tons of researches about anxiety disorders. Definitely, I'm not the first one, but it's just that most of these studies, they are actually focusing on younger populations. As you can see, we have Smart Cat 2.0, we have Treasure Hunt, Pesky Gymnast, My Night, and so on, targeting age 9 to 19 at most here. And then when it comes to the symptoms, and then some of them are actually targeting more specific symptoms such as agoraphobia, SAD, PTSD, acrophobia. There are all types of specific anxiety disorders, but not for really general usage. And then of course, for general usage, we also have Super Better, Treasure Hunt, and so on. It's just that anxiety would be the secondary outcome when it comes to helping with their condition. Depression is mostly their main concerns, and anxiety comes up as the secondary outcomes. Now, when it comes to the next part, all these games that I've listed here, they are task-driven. So what does it mean by task-driven? Basically, task-driven means that they are introducing the game in a form of providing goal-oriented tasks. For example, if you talk about if you talk about one of these game passage nuts, so this game requires the player to answer a few questions. How is your day today? What are your thoughts about your conditions today? What kind of solutions can you think of to overcome the situation? So basically you'll see that all these tasks are direct towards the players, whereby the players are required to answer all these questions, right? Instead of getting guidance. Of course, this requires psychotherapists to be beside of that, to provide additional information or guidance to them, but that's not really feasible when it comes to scenarios such as not being able to afford the treatment cost to get a proper CBT sessions, especially for those coming from low-income families. And then there are also situations where they can't access to this kind of treatment at all. Now, it appears that there are a few gaps that I can find for all these literatures that I've been working on. The first one is that despite numerous studies done on gamification and serious games for mental health treatment, most of them only target children and adolescents with the age group ranging from 7 to 19 years old. And then for Rewind, that I'm introducing to you later on, is targeting adults, which is age of 18 and above, instead of targeting childs. The next one is that existing solutions target more severe anxiety disorders, or that they are not focusing solely on anxiety. Like I said, they are focusing on depression and anxiety as secondary outcome, which is not desirable. And then next studies so far have only integrated CBT in games as a series of tasks, as I've explained just now, which is insufficient to keep players engaged and enhance the treatment adherence. So I use story-driven for my game. So what does it mean by story-driven, and how does it different from the existing task-driven? So for the game that I'm introducing, Rewind, which is a story-based serious game, basically I am incorporating all these therapies, the CBT therapies, into the game as part of the story rather than a series of tasks. Of course, you might see them as a series of tasks because it is delivered in the form of quest. It's just that instead of just simply telling you what to do next, right, all these therapies are delivered to the players in a more interactive form, in the form of stories, in the form of following a series of storylines with climax and all that, and then you will have a beginning and an end, compared to series of tasks, which the end goal will always be you learn something, and then the beginning of the task is that you have problems, so you need to learn something. So it's slightly different in the sense that stories delivered to you, whereby the players will experience all these contents from a third-person perspective rather than from a first-person perspective. That is my intention of developing this game. Now, and the last one is that given the difficulty to integrate session-based CBT content into a story-based design, there has not been any study venturing into games with story-driven settings implementing CBT that targets individuals with anxiety disorders. So it is really hard to strike a balance between education and entertainment, which is quite common for every existing games that are targeting psycho-education. Because the dilemma is that if I want it to be really educational, sometimes it lacks of the fun elements. Because when it comes to gamified solutions, it means that I'm including game elements into apps. When it comes to serious games, we talk about games not just for entertainment, but more to something more serious, for example, education. But again, because it is still a game, the balance should be there. And then here, in order to develop the stories for my game, this is the framework that I have used to come up with all these stories. So for the clarification, I am not coming up with all these stories on my own, just from my fantasies and all that. No, right? All these stories are remodeled after the actual situations, right, taken from the mental health forums. All right, so basically I took all these discussion posts from the mental health forums and then remodeled them based on the Alice ABCDE model, which includes activating event, the belief, the consequences, the disputation, and lastly the new effect. So I'm modeling the author's negative experience to the activating event, and then the decision and the response to those experienced as the belief of the game. And then the symptoms, the impacts on daily functioning or inconvenience caused will definitely be the consequences that the player face in the game. And when I say players, I'm not referring to the player as the one who plays the game, but from a third-person perspective, those NPCs. Right? And then after the actual player, as in, for example, me as a patient, after getting through all these ABCs, I'll be redirected to the part D, disputation, and then I'll be introduced with the coping strategies, 2 of them, and then 1 decision-making questions, which are part of the CBT elements, and lastly, they will be observing new effects on the ending of the scenarios. Alright, so this is basically the game flow in Rewind. This is one of the examples of the storyline. So firstly, you will get to see that you have to talk to the quest giver named Lars, and then the Lars will be explaining the situation, the A, the B, and the C to the player, and then introduce several coping strategies along the way, and then at the end of the day, new effect should be observed on Lars, and then quest summary will be provided. Of course, I keep on mentioning about Rewind. That is a game for that's the name for my game. So how does it actually look like? So let me just show you real quick. Alright, so hopefully everyone can see this. This is the game that I've developed called Rewind. So when you first start up this game, you will be given some tutorials explaining about the controls, like for example WSD, follow the movements, and then when you approach the NPCs in the game world, you will see indications and all that. This is because when I'm developing this game, I am hoping that the ones who are playing these games are not just gamers. Because I'm talking about those who potentially have anxiety disorders. When I say this, it includes those who are non-gamers as well. They definitely need some kind of guidance through this game. So as you can see, there will be indications and all that, guiding them through the game from the beginning to the end. And then you even have some navigation functions, alright? So once you get through all these tutorials, basically this is the characters that you'll be controlling. Alright, you can move around the game world, and then when you reach a certain point, you see some triggers to inform you additional information. For example, you can look for the quest via the map. Alright, typical RPG game elements. Alright, and then firstly, let me just show you the quest for the Lars. So this person here, the one in the red, this is Lars. So when you are near to this character Lars, you'll see a pop-up indication telling you there's a quest. You can talk to this person, and then you'll see all these narratives, alright? And then Lars will be explaining about his situation. So for example, have you experienced tremors while sleeping before? Right, so basically Lars will be explaining about his condition, and then you will see some texts are highlighted in green, indicating that these are some of the keywords, right, that the player should be focusing on. So experience tremors while sleeping, basically this is like what I've explained just now, the consequences. Alright, these are the actual symptoms taken from the mental health forums. Alright, and then you'll see, can you imagine how scary it is? So everything is delivered to the player in the form of a story. Why? Because it is less intrusive, and then it is much casual, so that the player can accept this kind of contents much more easily, as compared to talking to a therapist directly, like, oh, therapist, I'm having some problems, and then the therapist will be saying that, oh, you have a problem, that you should be doing this, doing that. Alright, it feels a little bit scary, and then imagine that we also have the reluctance to ask for help. So when it comes to games, if you are delivering the contents through a third-person perspective, it will be much easier to accept the contents, and then much more easier to relatable, especially when the contents are remodeled after real-life experiences. So when you talk to this person, we'll be explaining about his situations. I feel fatigued, right? Something about that. And then once you go through these narratives, and then Lucas, the person that you are controlling, will be saying that let's talk to the wellness sensei, alright, and then we can seek for the help from the others. So basically, you'll be moving around the game world, seek for help, and then you'll see the navigations telling you where to go next. And then on top of that, you'll see a progress bar telling you the current conditions of the characters. Right, so as you can see, it's like an anger face here, showing that he's not in a real good mood here. So you just follow the navigation around the game world, and then you should be able to reach your next destination to seek for the further help. Alright, so everything is delivered in a form of story, like I said, and then all these narratives has been validated by the actual psychotherapist. So I've consulted Dr. Tang Ying from the USA, and then also Dr. Mohammad, Dr. Farris Iman Leong, right, from the health center in Malaysia. Right, so all this stuff has been validated. So all these contents in the form of narratives will be delivering all these therapeutic therapy contents to the players from a third-person perspective. And then you'll see that when you talk to a different NPCs, this NPC will direct you to a different task. All right, here I use the word task, but actually it is in part of the story, which is slightly different from the task given that I explained just now. Because instead of telling you straight away that breathe for 5 minutes, all right, do some exercise for 10 minutes straight, all right, think more positively. So everything will be delivered to you in a more casual way. So for example, this Master Yamato will be telling this character to perform a meditation under the waterfall. So in reality, it doesn't work that way, but it's just that you can just go to the meditation in waterfall because we are talking about games, more fantasy settings, all right? So you can go to the waterfall next and then perform your next action. And then you will see that here, a relaxation technique called breathing technique has been introduced as part of the game, part of the stories as well. So you can move on along the storylines and you'll see that, okay, this is the breathing techniques and then this is how you can do. You'll see some text like breathe in, breathe out, guiding you through the whole processes instead of just a very boring way of therapist telling you to breathe in, breathe out. So now you're seeing everything in a game, but as you can see, it is more interactive as compared to talking to a therapist. Of course, I'm not saying that you should not talk to a therapist, all right? I'm not saying that, all right? I'm not saying that, definitely. I always encourage people to talk to the therapist for a more professional help. It's just that this is going to provide you with an alternative when you don't have any means to seek for professional help, right? As a complementary tool, like I said in the beginning. So once you have completed the task, and then this Master Yamato will be asking questions to reinforce your conditions, like how do you feel, what do you have in your mind, and then ask you a few questions related to the scenario. So for example, right, this Master Yamato will be asking, tell me what you do when your employer assigns you a task even though you are on a leave. Then you'll have to make some decisions here. So there's no right or wrong, at least theoretically. It's just that when you choose the less appropriate answer, for example, get ready and complete the task right away. All right? Do you even need to ask? Of course, I'll get ready. And then you'll see that this NPC will give you additional information. I'm sorry about that. So it appears that I don't have much time for this. So let me just conclude everything. Is that okay? Yeah, sure. So let me just move on straight away to the statistics. So based on the results, as you can see, all right, let me just, okay, here. So 20 participants, all of them age of 18 and above, university students have been recruited, and then they have to play through the game and to complete the game usability questionnaire, which is adapted from Mega Plus. And then this is the result. So what you are seeing here is that 85% of them, all right, agrees that the game is relevant in terms of applicable to real life, and then 15% of them just give a score of 4. 5 is the highest, 4 is the second one. And then in terms of anxiety relatable, 80% of them agree to that. 15% of them say that, okay, it's still relatable. And then 5 of them give a score of 3, and then none of them give a score lower than 3. And then last but not least, when it comes to satisfaction, okay, 50% of them agree that these games are really satisfied, and then 40% of them give a score of 4, and then 10% give a score of 3. None of them give any score lower than that. And as a conclusion, this whole research contributes in a sense that, right, introduce the game, a story-based, story-driven serious game, can be used as a complementary tool and non-intrusive treatment solution to improve, okay, the conditions of the players. And then introduce a framework which I've shown you just now. It is not part of the paper that I've published, it's just that this additional information that I'm providing right now. And then last but not least, it contributes a novel approach to serious game design. Right, this development of a story-driven game with a role-playing genre and third-person gameplay revamps the way CBT is implemented in the game. And that concludes my research, right, or my work. Thank you very much, sorry for the delay. Yeah.
Okay, lots of questions.
Right. So, thanks a lot for your presentation. I really like the game. It looks pretty great.
Thank you very much.
I have a question. So it's all about story-based, but is there like a general plot line? Like some
You mean a general plot line?
context on like what kind of world it is that you're put in?
Okay, so for this game, actually no. It's more like you'll be having separate storylines, so in the form of quests. So you have 6 different quests in the game, whereby you have to explore the game, we'll talk to different people, alright, and then you'll learn about different storylines, instead of having one general big story behind the whole game.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. I just thought it could be like an interesting idea, just a suggestion. That, for example, like at the beginning there was a cutscene that like there was a big bad villain that came to this world and everyone is feeling sad and anxious. And then, like at the end, after doing these 6 quests, you kind of come to this boss, to this villain, and you defeat him just repeating these techniques that you learned. So there is kind of another didactic point to that. So, yeah.
Right, thank you for the suggestion. And for information, because I don't have much time to just demo everything, for your information, all these 6 storylines have different settings, and then different strategies will be introduced throughout the game. So for example, the first quest will be explaining about breathing techniques, the relaxation techniques, as well as the cognitive restructuring. Say, for example, the second quest might be introduced to you a different strategies, such as behavioral experiments and so on. So different stories will have different settings and introduce to the players different kinds of CBT strategies, instead of having a fixed settings for like all storylines, because it is not possible and it is not it's not realistic in terms of real life applications, right?
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
First of all, great presentation. I have a question. So, of course, you consulted with the psychologist on the story, right?
Yeah.
And the game design.
Yeah.
Did any kind of research around the UX design and the visuals were like psychology related? Of what kind of color palette should you use based on like the audience that are using, for example, if they have anxiety, like what kind of flashlight? You understand?
I see. So unfortunately for this game, it focuses more on the narrative part. So it's a little bit negligent when it comes to like UI interface and all that.
Yes.
Yeah, but for future improvement, if there's any, definitely this is something that I have to take into consideration, including the audio. As you can see, there's no audio for this game. So there are lots of improvement. I won't say this is a perfect game. There are lots of things to improve, including the UI that you mentioned, such as the color setting, color palettes and so on. Yeah, definitely. But it's just that for this prototype that they're looking at, it is not part of the consideration, because the main contents will be the content, the narratives and the story itself. Yeah.
Yeah, and for my second question is that for measuring the success or the satisfaction of the audience, do you use interviews and surveys only? Like, did you use any other like tools, like I don't know, eye tracking and stuff like that?
I'm not using any IoT devices. I just rely on the questionnaires, and then because this is just part of the research of my master's degree. So for the actual research, it has been expanded further to explore whether it improves the conditions in terms of anxiety and so on. This is that for today's today's presentation is going to be focused on the satisfaction, game usability, and all that. To answer your question, just question it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. Also, really nice presentation.
Thank you.
Is it a game? So is it a game, or do you maybe answer this a little bit? But do you go back to the quests or the game, or is it like do you do them once and then you're?
You mean each of these storylines?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically you'll be going through each of these storylines only once, but for the game it does have a reset function where you can just reset everything and then you can just go through the game again and again, which is typically all games can do so. Right.
Did you make any study to see the efficacy of the game in treating anxiety?
Huh?
Did you make any study to check the efficacy of the game in terms of treating anxiety?
Yeah, like I said, this is just part of my master's degree.
Okay.
So because I'm just here to present my demo, for the full experimental study has been extended to evaluate whether this game is effective when it comes to helping them to improve their anxiety disorders, as well as the CERS, which is cognitive emotion regulation strategies. Yes, all of this has been experimented in my master's degree, right? So I just passed my master's degree a few months ago. So if you want, thank you, Mark. So If you like to know about the results, I'm happy to share with you, but definitely not here because since we
No,
have
I'll
some
send
time.
you an email for sure.
Yeah, so if you need any additional information, feel free to contact me so that I can just provide you with additional information about the results and all that.
Thank you.
Alright, thank you very much.